Hi there. In this video, I'm going to discuss an important source, a textbook written by Henry Wylde, who was the Gresham Professor of Music at the Royal Academy of Music in London. And also he was the founder of the London Academy of Music, that later became the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts, LAMDA. Henry Wylde, in his book Harmony and the Science of Music, complete in one volume. Before I go into the actual text itself, I want to give you a short biography of the man. So Henry Wylde was a music professor. His father, the same name, Henry Wylde, was an organist, and he at a very early age started his music education. He was a music professor in later life, a conductor, a composer. So born in Hertfordshire in 1822, and he went at 16 under Moschel, and in 1843 he became a student at the Royal Academy of Music under Cipriani Potter, of which academy he was afterwards appointed one of the professors of harmony. In 1850 he obtained the degree of Doctor of Music at University of Cambridge, and in 1863 he was elected the Professor of Music at Gresham College, London. And that now still exists, but it's also subsumed into the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. And he founded the London Academy of Music, which then went on to become LAMDA, the London Academy of Music and the Dramatic Arts. And in fact, LAMDA no longer teaches music per se. The music is now taught at the Royal Academy of Music, and LAMDA specializes in the dramatic arts. So this is Henry Wylde, a gentleman who knew what he was talking about. In chapter 11, he goes into some detail about the actual duration of time. And this is what he has to say. The actual duration of time, due to each comparative period, or to measures formed of them, can be known on finding the value in actual time of any one. Thus, if the crotchet is the duration of time occupied by the movement of a pendulum 1 foot in length, from its place of rest to its place of rest, the duration of a minim is equal to the time of 2 such movements, and the quaver to half the duration of 1 such movement. The value of the crotchet, etc., is not always thus given, quicker than allegro, etc. Remark: the accurate duration of time intended to be given to the brevi, semi-breve, etc., can be easily known if a machine called a metronome is used, and if the value of the breve, semi-breve, etc. is given as the duration of time occupied between the strokes of the pendulum set at indicated marks. Maelzel has adopted in his metronomes such marks on the slide of his pendulum as indicate the number of times the machine strikes in a minute. For example, a pendulum set at the figure 60 strikes 60 times in a minute, at 50, 50 times in a minute, and so on. And then there's a note. When no metronome is used, a pendulum made of string with a weight attached answers accurately enough to denote the value of the breve, and so on. For a breve, etc., can be said to be of the value of the vibration of a pendulum of a specific length. For example, the value of the breve is the time occupied in the vibration of a pendulum of 12, 13, 14, or any other number of inches in length. In using a pendulum of this kind, it is advisable to understand the following rules respecting it. Pendulums of equal lengths vibrate in equal times, even if their weights are unlike. In pendulums of unequal lengths, the times in which they vibrate are as the square roots of their lengths, and thus the lengths of the pendulums are as the square of the times in which they vibrate. Therefore, a pendulum which is to vibrate twice as slow as another must be 4 times as long, and vice versa, only a quarter as long, in order to strike twice as fast. So I've gone back now to the beginning of what he wrote about this, and it's very important to note that the metronome is a pendulum. It's treated the same as a pendulum. It's simply a pendulum that's working in a slightly different way. So, he says the actual duration of time due to each comparative period or to measures formed of them can be known on finding the value in actual time of any one. Thus, if the crotchet is a duration of time occupied by the movement of a pendulum of 1 foot in length from its place of rest to its place of rest. And that is the crucial line. In other words, and I'm going to move my hand here very slowly because the AI is going to do some weird thing. It's some kind of AI background thing I'm using here. So tick, tock, that's 1. Right? I'll do it again. Up, 1. Or in the traditional way of doing it in music, it's of course done up, well, down, up, not up, down. So down, up is 1. So this, I think, is quite good supporting evidence to the argument of how a metronome should be used and how the pendulum of a metronome should be read. We're now moving from 1871 to 1734. William Tans'ur, The Grounds of Musick. And here he has something to say about this. And it's quite interesting. The semi-brief, I'm reading here from number 1, behind me in the explanation. The semi-brief, whose length and proportion of time is so long as you may leisurely tell 1, 2, 3, 4, which is even slower than what I'm counting, by the slow motions of the pendulum of a large chamber clock. Now, if you've ever been in an old house and seen one of these clocks, they tick slowly. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Or any other pendulum of the like proportions, it being the longest note of any now in use, though formerly it was the shortest. So that also, I think, is quite important information about tempo and how fast music should be played. I would also like to point out that in discussions of the metronome that exist in various musical encyclopedias and so on that were written at the time that the metronome came into popular use, there are discussions about the pendulum and the use of the pendulum and then of the metronome. but no mention that the metronome is used differently to the pendulum. Simply that the metronome is a pendulum, but it's a pendulum that's double weighted, and it has a mechanical system to make it run for longer. But apart from that, it is simply a pendulum and is running by the same rules as a pendulum, as described by Dr. Crotch and so on and so forth. And I can go over that with you maybe in another video and look at some of these articles that discuss the metronome when it first came into being and developed first in Holland and then by Mazel in Paris. So I hope you found that useful, and TikTok.